Right. Well, my talk today is about prophecy because we are all gifted, and I do have a gift of prophecy. It started in the late 80s. I became conscious of it in the late 80s. I went to Medjugorje with my 11-year-old daughter, and we climbed the Cross Mountain. And at the station where Jesus meets his mother, I had a vision of Our Lady holding the baby in her arms, and she was covering and uncovering his face for me. And it had a deep impact on my faith in that I thought, wow, this is really real. God really does exist. And there was a nun in that group, Sister Mary Patrick, whom some of you might remember, Sister Paddy. And she invited me to join the prayer group in the convent after I'd said to her what I'd seen. It was a charismatic prayer group. And I started getting words of knowledge. And it scared me quite a lot. And I found it very difficult to share those words with people. But the Lord said, come on, you've got to do this. So I did it. I wasn't comfortable with it. I was kind of saying, no, Lord. And he kind of got the message and went away again. But then my daughter was 16 and she was quite upset one day because all of her friends were going to one college and she was going to the other sixth form college. And she said, I'm not going to know anybody. I'm not going to have any friends. And she was really quite distressed about it. And the Lord put these words that came out of my mouth. And I said, Victoria, you are going to have a friend there. Someone is going to come from outside and you are going to get on really well with them and it will be fine. And she calmed down. And I said to her at the time, I think you've just had my first prophecy. And she went to college and a girl from Bristol turned up, not knowing anybody either. And they became great friends. And Victoria took her off to the Anglican church with her. And it was lovely. So I've been a member of Adore for quite a long time now. It's got to be getting on for over 30 years, on and off. And I joined the healing team. And I was back with these words of knowledge again. But this time I was a little bit more comfortable about it. I was in a setting where you were expected to say things to people. So it was a little bit different and a little bit easier. And I would get some images that I would not necessarily interpret in the right way. I can remember saying to one lady, does prison bars mean anything to you? I can just see this set of vertical bars that are like prison bars. And she turned around and said to me, well, actually, I work in a children's nursery. So I thought, oh, perhaps they're cot bars then. So you don't always get it right first time. You don't always know what the message is or how the person is going to receive it. I can remember saying to a man one day, you need to talk to your wife. I had this picture of blackness and you need to talk to your wife. What I didn't know was that his wife had had a miscarriage. And you never know the effect of the story. And you just have to let the Lord take you where he wants you to go. I use quite a lot of words of knowledge for Adore. They come from several people, but the majority of them are quite often mine. And when people claim them, it's nice to know that the Lord is really talking to me. So your confirmation of the fact that it applies to you is really quite important for all of those who give those words of knowledge, because then they know they did get it right for that person for that day. So do please, if a word of knowledge applies to you, even if you don't phone the prayer line about it, do send a message to Alistair and say, that word of knowledge really spoke to me, especially the ones that aren't just about being ill and you need prayer for particular sickness. I've had some more powerful prophecies in the last couple of years. I went to a diocesan conference at Northampton, and I had this picture of a dam bursting. And I knew it was important. The war in Ukraine had started, and I knew it applied there. So I wrote that particular prophecy out and dated and signed it and gave it to Father Simon, who was at the meeting, and said, a dam is going to burst in Ukraine because it's been attacked by the Russians. It was about 6 months later that it actually happened. Fortunately, with very little loss of life. Tragic, though the loss of life that happened was. I was typing an email to Alistair one day, and these words just suddenly ended up on the page that there was going to be a council and all the bishops were going to be invited to Rome. And a week later, the synod was announced. So every so often, you get something, and I didn't really do anything with that one. I just happened to type it in an email to somebody. But you never know what the Lord is going to give you, and I don't always know how to use it. But usually it's for the person in front of you, for whatever reason. I tend to use it a bit on an everyday basis too. I was walking around earlier in the year and my foot was getting wet. And I checked my shoe. There was no hole in it. I said, okay, Lord, whose foot is getting wet? And my granddaughter came to mind. So I phoned my daughter and I said to her, I know this is a really weird question, but does my granddaughter need new shoes? And she said, what? She came back to me a couple of days later and said, you're right, she needs new shoes. There's a hole in the sole. So you never know what you're going to be given, how big it is, or how small it is. So do pray for words from the Lord. Put yourself in a prayerful situation and accept what he gives you. For me, I find that being in adoration is the best place to get those kind of words. I usually bring up the perpetual adoration from Tyburn Convent late in the evening and just sit there with the Lord, praying for whatever he wants to me to pray for. And every so often I'll say, okay, Lord, I need words of knowledge for a door. What do you want to give me? Those words of knowledge tend to come a bit differently in that during the month before, I will quite often get a particular pain. And I think, okay, that's for a door. And I will feel the pain of whoever it is that needs prayer at a door that day, that coming month. We all get messages from the Lord in different ways. And you might have messages from the Lord in a totally different way to me. But this is just an example of some of the ways that prophecy can operate. Thank you very much.